So New Balance recently released a new model with the Furon V7 Plus. So in this video, we're going to talk about what's good as well as what can be improved with this new model. And by the end of the video, hopefully you'll know if the Furons are going to be a good option for you. And after watching the video, if you are interested in picking up a pair or any of my other recommendations, check the links in the description where you can find them on sale with discount codes. To kick things off, let's start with the design. So if you are familiar with last year's Furon V7 Pro, the design of the V7 Plus is actually going to be really similar to that model. In fact, the upper is even going to have the same name, being this hypo-knit material. The biggest changes you're going to find with the upper are mostly going to be aesthetic, because when you look compared to last year's version that was actually really sleek and had a continuous, almost matte finish to it, the V7 Plus actually has more textured elements throughout. For example, if you look on top of the lace cover, you're going to see some ridged elements right here that weren't present on the previous version. And then also just towards the toe box, there's going to be some really subtle texturing that I like, because to me, it just makes the boots feel a little bit more premium, and the design just has a little bit more intention to it. Regarding how the upper itself feels, it's soft, pliable, and definitely really premium. I would say it's one of my favorite synthetic uppers on any football boot. Some synthetic materials can end up feeling a little bit rigid or plasticky when they're on your feet, but with the Furons, they walk a really nice balance here, and instead of getting that rigid feeling, they actually feel a lot more flowing. Then hiding just beneath this hypo-knit upper, you're gonna have a knit inner liner that's gonna go all around the collar here and just under the lacing system. Now around your ankle and the top of your midfoot, it's this knit elasticated collar that's gonna be making most of the contact with your feet, and that's a good thing because this knit material is really stretchy, so it's going to accommodate a wide variety of foot shapes. And then the lacing system is going to be this offset style, which is similar to previous versions. For me, I don't mind it too much. Essentially, you're still going to get even lockdown throughout the football boot, but the main reason I think New Balance has this offset lacing system is just to give you a slightly cleaner striking surface throughout the rest of the boot. I almost find the offset system that you get in the V7 Plus here to be a hybrid between a traditional lacing system and what you would get with a one-piece upper. And I also want to take a quick step back and just say, I think the V7 Plus in general just looks aesthetically a decent amount better compared to last year's version. I wasn't a huge fan of all of the design choices or colorways in last year's V7. I thought that the lace cover looked a little bit goofy on last year's model, but everything just looks a little bit more intentional and premium with the V7 Plus. Not to mention, I think the launch colorways have been a lot better as well. I've got it here in the all white version, and I think it's really, really clean. Then moving on to the inside of the boot, you're gonna have a nice padded heel liner just at the back of the boot here that's gonna be really helpful during your break-in period and preventing any blisters. Then you're also gonna have a removable insole that has a nice little bit of grip to it. Now moving on to the outsole, there's not too many updates here because it's gonna be pretty much exactly the same to the nylon outsole that we saw on the previous version. But just to recap, it is an extremely lightweight and aggressive outsole that contributes to this boot being extremely light overall. In fact, the V7 Plus in a size 10.5 that I have here comes in at about 189 grams, meaning that the only boot lighter than this should be the X Crazy Fast from Adidas. And then this sole plate is going to be extremely rigid throughout, especially through the heel and midfoot, where I can hardly bend it whatsoever in this area. And then you are going to have a little bit of a snap up towards the toe box. And then regarding the stud configuration, I mean, honestly, this is pretty much as aggressive as it gets in my opinion. You're going to have a total of 4 chevron studs in the heel and then 7 chevron studs in the forefoot. And these studs are also all positioned at slightly different angles to give you multi-directional traction, and they're going to be really good at digging into the ground on firm natural grass. And just to reiterate that point quickly, this is definitely an FG stud pattern, so I would recommend it almost solely for use on natural grass. Now, New Balance does sell an artificial grass variation of this sole plate and the Furon V7. It can be a little bit hard to find depending on where you live. I live in the United States and I find it pretty difficult to track down an AG version, but if you order some from Europe, you can find some models that have that AG sole plate. All right, now we've covered the main aspects of the design. Let's go on to the fit and feel. So I've said this with almost all of my other New Balance reviews, the fit and feel is usually a really strong point when it comes to these models. But keep in mind the Furon is the flagship speed boot of the New Balance line, so it is going to have some of those traditional characteristics you would expect from a speed boot. And that main characteristic being that it is going to be pretty slim throughout the midfoot and it's going to hug your foot very closely. But that being said, there was still just enough room in the toe box for my feet, and I would say that the standard variation here is one of the widest fitting speed boots that you can get. And to continue on that point, New Balance is going to offer the V7 Plus in both a standard variation and a wide variation. Now I have pretty wide feet and this standard variation is just wide enough for me. I definitely think I would still enjoy using the wide variation as well, but I personally would expect that the standard variation would work for the majority of people. But if you are someone who struggles to fit in a lot of different football boots and you have really wide feet around the toe box area, I would recommend checking out the wide variation because it is going to have a little bit more volume in the upper, which is just going to give you more space inside of the football boot. But ultimately, I do think that the Furon V7 Plus here, even in the standard variation, it is one of the most comfortable speed boots from the big brands in my opinion. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that New Balance just has pretty well shaped sole plates. They're fairly anatomical, and compared to some of the other brands like Nike, Puma, and Adidas, I think New Balance does a really good job at modeling their shoes a little bit closer to the shape of the foot. And for me, I found that to be true also when buying other shoes from New Balance like flat top sneakers. And regarding the fit of the V7 Plus, I like the fact that you don't really get any pressure points throughout the boot, so there's no hot points in the heel or towards the toe box even after a while of playing. Now in the past with a couple different New Balance models, I've had just a little bit of pain in the heel in my first couple sessions, but after using these for over an hour, there was no issues in the heel whatsoever. And then around the ankle, of course, you're gonna get that soft elasticated knit inner liner that made these boots really comfortable to slip on and off. Now regarding the fit, if I were to make one comment about something that wasn't necessarily my favorite, it would maybe be that the offset lacing system does actually sacrifice a little bit of adjustability compared to a traditional lacing system that's gonna run through the center of the midfoot. But for me, that wasn't a huge deal because these boots actually fit me pretty well without tying the laces at all. So pretty much all I had to do once I got them on was just kind of take the slack out of the lacing system, tie them moderately tight throughout the ankle just to confirm that the lockdown was there, and then I was good to go. And you want to be careful when you're wearing these boots because if you tie them too tight, the lace cover here is actually going to dig into the top of your ankle a little bit, and that's just a consequence of how these boots are designed. Now it's not going to do that unless you tie them extremely tight, so it's not something I would worry about too much. You can just experiment a little bit to find the right amount of lockdown for you. Now regarding sizing, I've heard a lot of people say that these fit pretty small and some people go up a half size. Now for me personally, I found that these in my traditional size 10.5 US fit perfectly, so I would recommend going true to size. And then if you happen to try these on and you think that you need a little bit more room in the toe box, maybe I would suggest not actually going up in size, but just try the same size but in the wide variation, because that boot is going to be the same length but just give you a little bit more space in that toe box. All right, next up, let's talk playability. So I'll be honest, there was a lot of factors that were going my way when I took these out to the field for the first time. For starters, it was an amazing day, probably one of the first nice days of the spring. And then I also had a brand new football to play with. I got the Nike Flight. It was on a crazy discount, so I had to pick it up. And it was so much fun to play with. I actually had a Nike Flight a little over a year ago, and then it got stolen. So this is the first time I've been able to play with that ball in a while, so it was a ton of fun. And that kind of brings me to my next point about playing in these football boots and playing in boots in general. I feel like when you go out to the field, when you get a new pair of boots, you kind of don't want to notice anything too much. You kind of just want to focus on playing without the boots getting in the way, and that's definitely what I felt like the Furons allowed me to do. They were super light on feet, really comfortable, and offered me enough lockdown in all of the right places. The touch on the ball was very close due to the thin upper, and it didn't feel too sticky, but also not too slick either. If I were to give it like a rating, 1 being the most slick and 10 being the most grippy, I'd probably say this is around like a 3 or 4, so it has a relatively matte finish to it. It's not like the Phantom GX where it's going to be grabbing the ball with every single dribble. It's going to give you pretty light, clean touches. And whether it's placebo or not, I do kind of like the fact that you get this extremely clean surface throughout the upper, and I know that's what New Balance is going for with the lace cover here, so to a degree, I think it does work out in terms of their design. But there is one thing that's going to stop me from bringing this model consistently to the pitch, and that's going to be the traction. And not because there wasn't enough traction, but conversely, because I think there was too much. Because for the vast majority of time, I play football on artificial grass pitches, and for that, I'm usually looking for sole plates that aren't quite as aggressive. Because with these bladed chevron studs that are on the V7 Plus, you're going to get almost no rotation whatsoever when you're on the pitch. Now, if you're playing on dirt or soft or natural grass, that might actually be what you're looking for because it's going to give you the aggression you need to prevent you from slipping. But you have to keep in mind that artificial playing surfaces like 2G, 3G, or even 4G pitches, they don't have the same give that natural grass has. They're not made of dirt, they're made of synthetic material. And it's for that reason that when you use a firm ground sole plate like this that's only intended for natural grass, it can put you at a slight added risk of injury when using it on artificial grass. And it's funny because New Balance has already solved this problem because, as I mentioned, they have an AG variation of the V7 Plus here. I just think that they should make it a little bit more widely available so that all players that need it can get it. Because if it was, I'd probably be reviewing that boot right now. But don't get me wrong, if you're a player that plays predominantly on those natural firm ground surfaces, then the sole plate on the V7 Plus is actually going to be a great option for you because it offers all that aggression. And then aside from the traction, these are still definitely one of the most comfortable speed boots that you can get compared to the other high-end options on the market. And speaking of those other high-end options, let's talk about the competitors to the V7 Plus. So I think the Furon V7 Plus here is pretty much going to be competing against the other high rollers in the speed boot category. So we're going to be talking about the Mercurial Vapor 15 from Nike, the X Crazy Fast from Adidas, as well as the Puma Ultra. So how does the Furon compare when it comes to fit and feel? Well, personally, among those four options, I think the V7 Plus is going to be the most comfortable just by a hair, and that's mostly because it offers a wider toe box, even in the standard variation. And on top of that, it's also going to be one of the most affordable options out of those four choices as well. Because the Vapor 15 and the Superfly 9 from Nike are going to be about $50 more expensive, and the X Crazy Fast is also going to be more expensive as well. The only boot there that's going to rival the Furons in terms of price is the Puma Ultra Ultimate, and in my opinion, the Furons are just going to be a much better bang for your buck and just a higher quality boot. I'd say anatomically the fit is most closely aligned with the Vapor 15 from Nike, but it's just going to have a little bit more width throughout the entire length of the boot. So in previous years, if you've been a big fan of the Mercurials from Nike or the Crazy Fast from Adidas, I would definitely recommend checking out the Furons because it potentially could be a better option for you. And lastly, let's talk about the value. So as far as high-end speed boots go, the Furon V7 Plus is going to come in at a relatively fair price of around $215. Now keep in mind this is the premium version of the Furon V7, and there are going to be takedowns that come in at a lower price. But with other high-end speed boots from Nike and Adidas retailing for around the $270 price point, this is going to be comparatively slightly more affordable. And as time goes by, you're going to frequently find certain colorways go on sale as well. In fact, if you use some of the links and discounts in the description, you might be able to pick up a pair for just under $200 as well. But nevertheless, $200 is still quite a lot of money for a pair of football boots. And if I'm spending that kind of money, I'm definitely expecting a certain level of quality, and the good news is I think New Balance is hitting the mark that I'm expecting. In fact, the design, materials, and overall build quality are definitely comparable with what I've seen in more expensive models. So what are my final thoughts on the V7 Plus? So if you've got a budget of around $200 and you're looking for a new pair of lightweight and aggressive speed boots, then the Furons should definitely be on your list. I think it's really cool that they're offering both standard and wide variations of this boot, and I think it's going to make it a lot more accommodating for more people on the market, especially considering that even the standard variation is more comfortable than a lot of the other competitors. The Furon V7 from last year was already a great football boot, and the V7 Plus just continued with all of the things that we liked from that model. And as an added bonus, I think they also improved the aesthetic and just added much better colorways. If I could only give one suggestion to New Balance, it would just be to make the AG variation more widely available. And that is going to do it for this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've gotten the chance to try on these boots and what you think of them. I've got a lot more content coming out in the coming weeks that I'm really excited to make for you guys as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.